A man in London was walking through the chilly, snow-covered street. The wind was howling through the tall building. The shop windows were glowing with light, and the city seemed frozen in a winter wonderland as it got ready for Christmas. He decided to head to one of the main shopping streets, eventually making his way to Selfridge, the iconic department store. Although he lived in a modest small flat in London, he made it a tradition to allow himself the pleasure of wandering the aisle in search of the perfect gift each year. As he browsed through the aisle filled with toys, his eyes landed on the teddy bear, sitting alone on a shelf appearing almost forgotten. There was something special about this bear that caught the man's attention. Perhaps it was the slightly lost, slightly melancholic expression on its face. Maybe it was the way he felt a sense of abandonment and quiet need in the bear. Without much thought, he picked up the bear and decided to give it to his wife as a Christmas present. Little did he know that this simple, spontaneous gesture would change everything, and that is how a legend was born. That is how the tale of Britain's most famous bear began. That is how the story of Paddington began. Michael Bond was born in 1926 in Burberry, Berkshire. He grew up in a small English town in a modest but loving family. His father worked at the post office and his mother made sure nothing was ever missing, even when they had almost nothing. During the war, life became difficult, very difficult. He later recalled,
My mother, though the war was on and things got very bad at that time, she made sure we always had never went without food. And life actually, looking back on it, did become very difficult.
At 17, Michael started working. He soon joined the BBC as a cameraman. But London, at this time, was burning. The war was raging. He was assigned to film the bombing scene of rain, chaos, and fear. One day, he found himself on the rooftop watching a formation of planes overhead.
Interested in wireless. So I wrote it off, and to my amazement, I got a letter back with a BBC heading. And it was the BBC at that time were erecting low-power transmitters all over the country, which, in the event of enemy aircraft coming over, they went off as they went over and then came back on again. And the engineer in charge, it was just sort of with the system was assembling it, and he said, "Do you know what Ohm's law is?" And I said, "Yes, it's E over I equals R." And I don't think he fell over with amazement. He gave me the job. And I mean, this would never happen these days. So that's how I joined the BBC. And that changed my life enormously. And I stayed with the BBC until I was 17, working on this transmitter. Although in between whiles, it was nearly the end of me because a little, about 6 months later, it was payday on a Wednesday, and we were at the top of a building. And right at the bottom there was what they call a British restaurant, which was a low-price restaurant for the hoi polloi. And we heard the sound of an approaching airplane, and somebody rushed to the window and said, oh God, it's a dawn here. And the words were hardly out of his mouth when there was a string of bombs dropped. It was a plane obviously being chased back to Germany, and I think along with the others I died about 6 times as each one got nearer and nearer, and every time I tried to get up, I got blown down again. And we were very fortunate because it was going flat out and very low. The bombs were coming almost horizontal. Pardon me, almost horizontally into the building. So we escaped on the top of the building, but the underneath part of it was all blown away, and everything landed. All the people in the restaurant down below were killed. We managed to climb down what was left of the stairs, and first thing I saw, I remember, was a girl whose legs had been blown off. The second thing I saw when I got down the bottom was somebody putting their hand up through the rubble. An elderly hand that had some false teeth in it, you know, and we were extremely lucky to escape. So I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to be killed by a blast of bombs or anything like that.
That air raid killed 41 people. The building he had been standing on was completely destroyed. Later, he enlisted in the army. He served first in the Royal Air Force, then in the Middlesex Regiment. Towards the end of the war, he was sent to Cairo, and it was there, far from everything, that he began to write. The year was 1945. He sold his first story to a magazine called London Opinion. He also wrote the radio, but he did very little. I was paid 7 guineas at this time. It convinced me I'd never be able to make a living from writing. In 1947, he returned to London. He got a job again at the BBC. At the time, television was just beginning to emerge. Michael Bond became one of the very first cameramen to work live on air. He would later say it was stressful, but incredibly exciting. He worked on all kinds of programs, including children's shows. He even wrote for some of them. And it was around that time that he moved into a small flat near Portobello Road. While browsing the aisle of Selfridge, he came across a teddy bear, sitting alone on a shelf. He found it wandering, a little lost. He thought of his wife, he bought it and took it at home. The bear now sat on a shelf in his flat. A few months later, in 1956, Michael Bond sat at his typewriter, a blank page, no ID. And suddenly, his eye met this bear, and he imagined a little bear from far away, found at Paddington Station, with a suitcase, a tag around his neck, and most of all, great courage and impeccable manners. I hadn't planned to write a book. I just started typing and then it became a book. 10 days, he wrote the manuscript for a beer called Paddington. The book was published in 1958. He didn't know yet, but he had just created an icon of British literature. Paddington, the little bear with a big earth, would become one of the most beloved characters in the UK and the world. Michael Bond would go on to become one of the most widely read authors in Britain history. With over 35 million books sold and generations of children moved by this bear from Peru. As we've mentioned, Paddington is a little bear who met the Brown family at Paddington Station in London. When the Brown discover him, he doesn't have a name. He's there, alone, with a suitcase and a tag tied around his neck that read, "Please look after this bear. Thank you." It's Mrs. Brown who suggests naming him Paddington, simply because it's the name of the station where they found him. And the bear replied, "Paddington, I like that name. It's unlike the name of someone important." That name is no coincidence. Michael Bond, the author, lived not far from Paddington Station when he wrote the story, and in an earlier television script he had created a character called Paddington, but the production had changed the name to Partington. Paddington is instantly recognizable. He wore an old hat, often too big for him, a blue duffel coat with a hood, and he always carried his small suitcase. Why a duffel coat? Simply because Michael Bond wore one at the time. But there is more. 3 symbolic items mark his first meeting with the Brown. First, of course, marmalade. Paddington loved it. He put it everywhere, literally. It is a never-ending source of comics moments. He slips on, smears it on the wall, attracts birds. He always a bit sticky, a bit messy. Then the suitcase, a small, worn suitcase in which he keeps all his belongings. It symbolizes travel, displacement, the fact that he comes from far away, from darkest Peru, and finally that famous tag, "Please look after this bear, thank you." It's perhaps the most powerful element of the character, because, in truth, Michael Bond wasn't just creating a children's character. Paddington is not like Winnie the Pooh or Peter Rabbit, from a world that floats somewhere between tales and fantasy. Paddington is rooted in reality. He comes from far away, he is alone, he is looking for a home, and he arrives in England with only a suitcase, a coat, and hope. It is 1968. The United Kingdom is slowly emerging from the shadow of war. Buildings are being rebuilt. Streets are coming back to life, but in the collective memory, some images remain indelible. Among them, the image of children alone, transported by train, with a tag around their neck and a suitcase in hand. During the Second World War, between 1939 and 1945, nearly 827,000 British children were evacuated from major cities, London, Liverpool, Birmingham, to the countryside as part of Operation Pied Piper, the goal to protect them from Nazi bombing. These children, torn from the family, were sent to live with strangers. Only identification, a label pinned to their coat. Some were only 5, 6, 7 years old, and they left without fully understanding why, for an unknown world. Added to that were the nearly 10,000 Jewish children welcomed into the UK under the Kinders transport between December 1938 and September 1949. Fleeing Nazi persecution, they too arrived by train, often alone, often never to return. Michael Bond, a young man at this time, witnessed it all. He saw those children in the station. It left a lasting impression on him. So when he imagined Paddington, a small bear from darkest Peru, alone in the station, with a suitcase and oversized hat, and a tag around his neck, he wasn't just creating a children's character. He was giving a face to all those displaced children, a gentle, innocent, courageous faces. But on that was profoundly human. And that is the quiet stress of Paddington. It doesn't represent just the kinder transport, not just the British evacuee. It embodies the memory of all children displaced by war, exiled, uprooted, sent far from home without understanding the world around them. And above all, it embodies the hope that, even lost, even alone, one can be welcome, loved, and cared of. Paddington is the Britain answer to that collective pain, a subtle but powerful symbol of a country that, in 1958, still remembered what it had endured and what it had offered to those in need. A small lost creature chosen to be loved, not because he is perfect, but because he is vulnerable. And perhaps that's why Paddington has endured, across generation, across border, and across time, because he reminds us that something, a suitcase, a label, and a little politeness are enough to touch something profoundly universal. Throughout the 70s, the Paddington book enjoyed growing success. But it was in the 70s that the little bear in the duffel coat reached out a decisive milestone. He stepped out of the book and became a toy. It all began in 1972 in a small family-run business in Yorkshire called Gabriel Design. The company was run by Shirley and Eddie Clarkson, a passionate couple. One day, they decided to create a teddy bear inspired by Paddington for their own children, Joanna and Jeremy Clarkson. That Jeremy, who would go on to become one of the UK's most famous television presenters, notably on Top Gear. The prototype was simple, but already featured all the defining elements of Paddington: the coat, the hat, and, most importantly, the iconic rubber boots. These boots weren't just a random edition. They had already been popularized in 1974 in an advertisement for the book Paddington March On. The very first plush toys were made using real children's boots, supplied by Dunlop Rubber, a well-known British brand. This practical detail, which helped the bear stand upright, quickly became iconic. The first bear was an instant hit. Michael Bond, charmed by the quality of the toy and its faithfulness to his character, officially approved the commercial sales of Paddington plush toys. And very quickly it became a phenomenon. The demand was so high that he even led the shortage of rubber boots. The toy became a cult object in British household. Paddington moved from the page to the living room, from imagination to reality, and secured his place in popular culture. But this rapid success did not come without complication. As demand grew, the first legal issue appeared: licensing problem, production dispute, right management. After several years, the small family business eventually gave in. The right to Paddington toys were sold to Hamleys, the UK's oldest toy store, founded in 1760. After the success of the book and then the plush toys, only one thing was missing for Paddington to become a true icon: television. And in 1976, on BBC One, Paddington made his first animated appearance. The series officially ran until 1980, with a few special episodes broadcast in the year that followed. The show was designed for children, but it also charmed adults. It was very directly adapted from Michael Bond books, with Bond himself writing the script. Except for a few television executive specials, everything remained faithful to the original literary universe. The project was entrusted to Ivor Wood, a British animator and director already known for his work on The Magic Roundabout and Postman Pat. Wood collaborated with the production company Filmfare, which became a major force in British animation during that period. And the narration was voiced by Michael Horndern, a distinguished stage and film actor whose calm, warm voice became instantly iconic for the series. But what stood out most was the visual style, a unique style very popular in the 70s and typical of Ivor Wood's production. Each scene had a 2D animated background, flat drawing with mostly static character, and at the center of this nearly frozen world was Paddington, a small stop-motion figurine complete with coat, hat and suitcase, a three-dimensional character moving through a paper-like world. The result was both simple and magical, an uncrafted universe, sometimes a little wobbly, but full of charm. Characters spoke, but it was always the narrator who guided the story, describing what Paddington did or through, as if the tale were being read aloud in Shield's bedroom, as if the tale was being read aloud in a child's bedroom. The series was a major success in the UK, but not only there. It was broadcast in many Commonwealth countries and a few beyond. France, Ireland, Brunei, Japan, Hong Kong, Italy, Germany, New Zealand, Australia. Paddington became a cultural ambassador, a little traveling bear just like in The Adventure. The classic episodes were about 5 minutes long, but starting in the 79, the series expanded with 3 long specials, around 20 minutes each. In 1989, a new adaptation of Paddington was released. This time, the setting shifted to the United States. The series, titled Paddington Bear, was produced by Hanna-Barbera Studio in collaboration with Central Independent Television, which would later become ITV. On paper, the project seems promising. 13 episodes, each 20 minutes long, broadcast internationally, but in practice, the version struggled to win over audience. To be fair, the series remained generally faithful to Michael Bond writing, and some episodes even reused classic storyline. But the spirit of the original seems to have vanished somewhere between London and Los Angeles. The animation, for starters, was very basic. It follows the typical style of the 1890s TV animation, mass-produced with stiff movement, static background, and a dull color palette. The result felt rather cheap, lacking the handcraft charm and delicacy of the series of the 1976 series. But what disappointed most was the tone. The humor became heavy-handed, almost cartoonish. Gone was the subtle British wit, the gentle warmth that gave Bond books their unique flavor. War style, new elements were added artificially without real narrative purpose. Among them, a brand new character, David, an American boy introduced as the cousin of Jonathan and Judy Brown, a pointless adaptation clearly designed to appeal to American audience, but it disrupts the balance of original world. The joke fell flat, the writing lacked nuance, and the pacing felt sluggish. Where Paddington is usually clownish but endearing, here he becomes almost clownish, losing much of the original charm that made him so beloved. In 1996, Paddington returned once again to the small screen, and this time it was the more convincing comeback. The series was titled The Adventure of Paddington Bear, and it aired until 2000, with a total of 39 episodes across multiple seasons. It was an international co-production, bringing together Cynar, a Canadian studio, Canal J, Cartoon Network, ITV and TF1, an ambitious project aimed at a wide audience from Europe and North America. The first 2 seasons were directed by Marco da Silva and the third by François Perrault. Although the series was still based on the character created by Michael Bond, this version took a bit more creative liberty. New characters appeared, along with original situations, often humorous, yet always in the British spirit of the original work. The animation was noticeably more polished than the 1989 version. The drawings were bright, colorful and dynamic, with a style that matched the taste of the late 90s. Paddington was once again charming and expressive, finally regaining the appeal lost in the previous series. Paddington's voice was provided by Jonathan Kidd, who gave the bear a mischievous, cheerful tone, a bit chattier than in the earlier version. This Paddington often took matters into his own pond, turned situations around with wit, and delivered a steady stream of playful remarks. This, however, may also be one of the show's weaknesses. By making Paddington more lively, more reactive, more prankish, the series lost some of the innocence and awkward politeness that defined him in Michael Bond's book. But, at the same time, this tone reflects the era, and for the young audience of the late 90s, it worked well. Overall, the series was quite successful, well produced, well voiced and entertaining, but it's clearly tagged a younger demographic, up to around 10 or 12. He lost a bit of the layered storytelling and the gentle wit that make the book enjoyable for the whole family. One more questionable change: the origin of the character was slightly altered. In the version, Paddington doesn't leave Peru to loneliness or abandonment, but because of an earthquake. A narrative choice that adds little and distanced the story somewhat from the symbolic depth of the original version. In 2019, Paddington returned once again in animated form, in a series titled like a nod to the earlier version, The Adventure of Paddington. But this time, the result is nothing short of remarkable. The series spans 3 seasons, 41 episodes for the first, 15 episodes in the second, and 34 for the third, which conclude in 2025, an impressive total for a contemporary animated show. The production is backed by major industry names: Heidi Film, Studio Canal, Nickelodeon, M6 and Pee-wee Plus, a children's channel from Canal Plus Group. In other words, this is serious business. Paddington became a high-end international production. The series was developed by James Lamont and John Foster, 2 experienced writers best known for their work on the amazing world of Gumball. This 2019 version is rendered in 3D animation, but with a soft texture, warm style that evoke illustration book with modernizing the world, and above all, is succeeded where many past versions fell short. Paddington is adorable, but never naive. The characters are nuanced, well-written, never caricatured. The storylines are rich, often unexpected, sometimes even moving. Each episode starts with a simple premise, but take a surprising narrative turn, with clever twists, moments of poetry, and even a touch of gentle fantasy. All delivered with a great sensitivity, warmth, and subtitle humor that appeal to both children and adults. But what truly sets the series apart from the predecessor is its modernity. Unlike older animated series frozen in the older TV format, The Adventure of Paddington is designed for the whole family. It doesn't shy away from contemporary themes, handler, but with thoughtfulness. The show explores immigration and integration, cultural and religion, blend family and tolerance, even gender identity and diversity. In one episode, Paddington learns about the LGBTQIA+ flag. In another, veiled characters appear, not a topic to be discussed, but simply as a natural reflection of today's London. And all of it is unled from a child's perspective, never didactic, never oversimplified. In short, this animation series is a true artistic and narrative achievement. It manages the rare feat of blending fidelity of the spirit of Michael Bond's original book, the modern world we live in today, and the timeless magic that make Paddington a universal character. And for anyone who thought Paddington belonged to the past, this series proved episode after episode that he's never been more alive. After years of silence, Paddington returned to the big screen. In 2013, Studio Canal UK, TF1 and Heidi Films decided to take a gamble on a half live-action, half 3D film, an ambitious project that would come to life in 2014. Paddington. With a budget of 38.5 million, it wasn't a Hollywood blockbuster, but it was a bold bet for Studio Canal, which was banking on the iconic British character. The cast was exceptional. Hugh Bonneville as Mr. Brown, Sally Hawkins as Mary Brown, Julie Waters as Mrs. Bird, Nicole Kidman as a charismatic villain, and Ben Whishaw lends a soft, mischievous voice to Paddington. The film takes a classic yet affective storyline. Paddington's arrival in London, his meeting with the Brown family, and a wicked taxidermist who is hunting him down. But beyond this family film premise, it offers real emotional depth. What strikes you is how much the film breathes London. The sets feel real, alive, never static. You get the sense that the camera could wander through the entire city, and this authenticity makes the film warm and immersive. It's not just a kids' movie. Paddington speaks to the whole family, with a sharp humor, brilliant visual gag, and universal theme. What is family, hospitality, exile? It's the sort of lost bear looking for a place to be loved. The result, a critical and commercial triumph. 380 million at the global box office. The success was such that 2 sequels were immediately greenlighted. In 2017, Paddington 2 brought back the same team, still led by Paul King. And if the first film was a delightful surprise, the second would become a masterpiece. The villain, this time Hugh Grant, as a washed-up, egocentric actor who has time of his life in a hilariously over-the-top, self-parodying role. Every scene with him is a joy, and the film pushes the mix of comedy and poetry even further. With a budget of 40 million, Paddington 2 grossed 283 million, and was even, for a time, crowned the best-rated film of all time on Rotten Tomatoes. An unexpected feat that cemented the universal appeal of The Little Bear. The plot, centered around a mysterious pop-up book and a memorable sequence where Paddington ends up in prison, deliver incredible inventivity visual, where humor and emotional intertwine to perfection. And now, we come to Paddington's third cinematic adventure, Paddington in Peru, released in 2025. This time, Paul King steps aside. The film is directed by Douglas Wilson, a filmmaker best known for his commercial and music video. A surprising choice, which gives the whole thing a slightly different tone. The film tried to stay in the line with the first two, but chose to live in London beyond to head to Peru, following in Aunt Lucy's footsteps. The setting is more exotic, more adventurous, but at this time this gives the film a more childlike tone, where the first two installments managed to appeal equally to child and adult. This one feels a bit more geared toward younger audience. On the casting side, the Brown family returned, but Sally Hawkins stepped down and it's replaced by Emily Mortimer. It's a small loss. Hawkins had brought a truly Wisconsin charm to the role of Mary Brown. The main villain is played by Olivia Colman, and as always, Colman is magnificent. She brings a mix of madness and class that work beautifully. On the other hand, Antonio Banderas playing a troublemaker role, sometimes overreact, and struggle to reach the comic subtlety of Hugh Grant in Paddington 2. You can feel that the second film remains a hard benchmark to surpass. On the production side, Studio Canal remained at the helm, but Sony Pictures joined the adventure, and the budget is double compared to the previous film. The investment is evident on screen. The Peruvian sets are stunning, but it also feels like a formula has become slightly more polished. There is less of that freedom of inventness that made the first two films so charming. Yet, Paddington 3 keep it tender-hearted. The film delicately explores themes of family, exile, and multiple identity. Paddington finds himself torn between his adoptive family in London and his roots in Peru, and the moving play with tenderness and emotion, featuring particularly poetic dream sequences. But in the end, even if Paddington in Peru remains a good family film, it loses some of the magic, humor, and inventiveness that made the first two films true gems. Another defining moment in Paddington on even greater meaning after the Queen's death in September 2022. It became one of the Elizabeth II's final public appearances and, in turn, a sort of symbol. Spontaneously, thousands of Britons placed Paddington plush toys and marmalade sandwich outside Buckingham Palace and other royal residences. This touching and unexpected gesture strengthened the connection between the character and the collective memory of the nation. Thus, without an intention of doing so, Paddington became an integral part of British history. From a simple children's book character, he evolved into a cultural symbol, almost an ambassador of kindness, respect, and warmth. Values that were often associated with the Queen herself. Paddington is far more than just a cute character or a simple children's mascot. He has become one of the great British symbols of inclusion and kindness, an ambassador of value that transcends generations. When Michael Bond created Paddington, he didn't just invent a bear with a duffel coat and a love for marmalade. He created a character that reflects the history, resilience, and cultural evolution of the 20th century Britain. Over the decade, through his book, animated series, and film, Paddington has grown alongside the audience who discover him. He has always carried a message of openness, curiosity, and empathy. A reminder that being different is not a weakness, but a source of richness. In many ways, he has helped children and adults to understand the importance of acceptance, of building bridge between culture, and of looking at the world with both wonder and kindness. Today, Paddington is not only a cultural emblem, but also a kind of mirror of British identity. A character who, with his innocence and humor, highlights what is the best in humanity. And it is for all these reasons that Paddington will undoubtedly remain one of the most beloved and enduring icons in the history of Great Britain. So, that was the history and evolution of Paddington, from his little notebook to his biggest success on the big screen. And you, what is your favorite memory of the bear in the blue coat? Let me know in the comment. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe and share it, because, after all, a little marmalade and kindness is always a good thing.